watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines. US President Donald Trump tweets that he will be meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit in Osaka later this month. Trump put out this tweet after what he called a very good telephonic conversation with Xi. Bloomberg reports that the White House has considered demoting Fed Chair Jerome Powell in February. The White House has said that there is no such proposal currently under consideration. The two-day meet of the FOMC is currently underway. The result will be out later today. Maharashtra has projected that its state revenue deficit will widen in FY20 in its budget for the year. The state's fiscal deficit, though, is expected to narrow marginally. The Reserve Bank of India has imposed a penalty of 1 crore rupees on HDFC Bank for not complying with KYC and anti-money laundering norms. And the 17th Lok Sabha will be electing its speaker today. While the NDA nominated Om Birla as their candidate, the opposition is yet to nominate one. All right, it was a positive day of trade for the markets on Wall Street after President Trump's tweets confirming trade talks with China, in fact, specifically with Xi Jinping. The Dow Jones and the S&P 500 closed at their highest level in 6 weeks. The S&P 500 ended just 1% shy of its all-time closing high. Renita Young of Bloomberg News brings you a wrap of Tuesday's trading day.
U.S. equities approached all-time highs on Tuesday, with all three major averages ending 1% or better than 1% higher after U.S. President Donald Trump said that he would meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit. This stoked optimism that Trump will be able to de-escalate an ongoing trade war happening with China. Now, this also happens as the U.S. Federal Reserve is meeting and is widely expected to take on a more dovish tone after its meeting because of signs that the global growth had been faltering lately. Now, gold rose slightly and WTI crude oil also gained. Treasuries rose and the Bloomberg Dollar Index ended slightly down. Now, this happens, interestingly enough, as Facebook rallied because it said it would launch a new cryptocurrency as early as next year, joining with Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal. They're hoping to replace the U.S. dollar, and because of that, Bitcoin actually declined versus the U.S. dollar by the most since around June 4th, and the Bloomberg Galaxy Crypto Index actually closed down more than 1%. And that's a look at your Tuesday Wall Street action. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
Now, understandably, after those tweets by President Donald Trump, there is a lot of positivity across the board in equity markets. Let's have a look at what's happening in the Asian markets. A lot of them have come online now. Sophie Kamruddin is joining us live from Hong Kong with all the updates. Sophie, across the board, looks like it's going to be a green day.
Yeah, positive mood indeed this Wednesday. Asian stocks extending that rally that we saw on Wall Street, with Chinese and Hong Kong stocks leading that advance, and the small cap tech gauge of Chinese companies that is rallying over 3%, and tech names are leading the charge on the Hang Seng here in Hong Kong. Sunny Optical jumping more than 10% as Citi sees more silver linings after the company maintained its 2019 forecast, offsetting fears then of any impact from Huawei. And the Shanghai Composite is adding nearly 2%, and stocks in Japan are also rallying. The Nikkei 225 is up 1.8%, with tech and automakers rising despite the slump and exports seen in the May trade data. And the Kospi is joining this regional advance, rising more than 1%, and the Korean won has jumped to a 1-month high, and bonds are gaining after the Bank of Korea meeting minutes, which hinted at the potential of a rate cut next month. And Aussie shares are extending gains at December 2007 levels. So as you say, across the board, it is green across the screen midweek. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Sophie. Well, let's talk about the key highlight from last night and the reason why a lot of markets are positive. The stalled trade talks between the US and China finally saw some progress last night. President Trump tweeted that he had had a telephonic conversation with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and that they will have an extended meeting at the G20 summit in Osaka, Japan next week. He also told reporters outside the White House that this is working just as he anticipated. Derek Wallbank of Bloomberg News reports.
We don't know it, but you did see markets move on what I like to call happy talk from Trump and Xi. They're going to be meeting next week in Osaka. That's big because there had been a little bit of doubt that they might actually have that meeting, given all the givens. And Donald Trump had threatened to put on tariffs on pretty much every remaining thing that China exports to the United States if that meeting didn't happen. So you do get a bit of risk off there. That threat now goes dormant, and you prepare for the meeting. They're going to have some preview conversations before that at a staff level, and then major meetings at the G20. I think this is going to be the event of the year in terms of global geopolitics. So much in terms of global trade is riding on these conversations that are going to happen in Osaka. Do I expect it to be completely done after that? Probably not, but I do expect us to get a pretty good signal from next week on where we're headed.
You know, interestingly, and one of the big talking points, of course, was the European Central Bank decision, and in fact comments by Mario Draghi yesterday about the potential stimulus if things don't pan out the way they're supposed to with the economy. And President Donald Trump's tweets were also viewed by some as quite interesting, where he commented on the measures that were announced, or the announcement that was made by Mario Draghi, and said that it was unfair to the US. We'll get back to that in a short while. The two-day FOMC meeting is currently underway. Bloomberg reported that the White House had explored considering legal options to demote Fed Chair Jerome Powell. While the White House denied that and said that no proposal is currently under consideration, President Trump said, and I quote, "Well, let's see what he does," end of quote, referring to the Fed meeting. Kathleen Hayes brings you the latest.
Jay Powell has said publicly, I won't step down. The Fed keeps saying you can't get rid of a Fed chair unless you have cause, and not agreeing with the president on rates is not considered cause. He also talked later in the day, President Trump, about Powell saying, let's see what he does on the Fed policy announcement when he talks about this demotion, et cetera. For now, they're supposed to hold their key rates steady and wait for more data. But one thing they've got to be watching closely, inflation expectations. Look at this, because the Fed saw stronger retail sales. They're more confident in the economy in the second quarter and beyond. But inflation expectations are falling. How are you going to get your inflation rate, which is now running about 1.5%, up to 2%, if that's what inflation expectations are doing? And in fact, Sherry, more and more the talk is, according to our Bloomberg News Eco team, gathering a lot of remarks that if anything, the Fed may wait for a while, but when they move, they may be forced to do a 50 basis point cut. We'll see what we get in the policy statement in Jay Powell's presser tomorrow. We hope to have a lot revealed. Let's wait and see.
All right, just to tell you a little more about that tweet that I was mentioning just a short while back, what he said is that Mario Draghi has just announced more stimulus could come, which immediately dropped the euro against the dollar, making it unfairly easier for them to compete against the USA. They've been getting away with this for years, along with China and others. Of course, this tweet came just before the other tweet that set all the markets rollicking and could in fact result in us here in India also taking some positivity from the international markets. Agam Vakil is here to talk about that and also to tell you what's happening in the futures and options space. It seems like it's going to be a good start based on everything that's happening. Asian markets are all positive. US markets were rollicking. European markets were positive for other reasons. But across the board, it's good news.
Well, for a change, Alex, we very well may see a very positive start based on the kind of cues that we're getting from the global indices. For now, the SGX Nifty is definitely indicating that 0.5% gain. But how was the market movement yesterday? Well, marginal moves, marginal gains, but not too much to speak for when it comes to the broader markets like small cap or the mid cap indices. But when it comes to the banking indices, we did see, again, a little more of a move and a little more of gains coming through. The ADRs at this point are looking looking up. Vedanta, Tata Motors, Dr. Reddy's, Infosys, all gaining. And we've seen only margin losses in HDFC Bank. So it may very well turn out to be a good opening for some of these stocks. Very little activity from domestic institutions, or for that matter, for foreign portfolio investors, as you can see on your screen there. Only 32 crores coming in from the FII stable. Again, it was a very subdued day of trade. We didn't see too much happening. So the likes of ICICI Bank, Infosys, and Bajaj Finance's gains was cancelled out by HDFC Limited, Maruti Suzuki, and Indiabulls Housing Finance. But moving on to your futures and options, and again, we did see about 3% increase in open interest as far as the Nifty futures go. The Bank Nifty futures also saw a decline of around 2%. Moving on to your open interest, well, we did see the same 500-point range across the 11,500 and the 12,000 strikes. And in terms of changes in open interest, we're keeping an eye on 11,700, where we saw writing both in calls and puts, which means people have written that particular straddle as far as yesterday's day of trade is concerned. But moving on to your WIX, well, it's come off. It's very at a relatively stable level of around 14.6. And your put call ratio of, again, at a very neutral level of 1.1. It hasn't really changed too much. We still have the One Housing Finance, IDBI Bank, and Jet Airways in the F&O band. Besides that, we have PC Jeweler and Reliance Capital as well. Reliance Infra is out of the band, but you never know. We may very well see some pressure coming through. SRF, Piramal Enterprises, and United Breweries, among others, which are seeing an increase in OI. And on the other hand, we are keeping an eye on Jet Airways, Oriental Bank, and Chennai Petro. Jet Airways is going to be a tough one to call, considering it has seen a free fall. It was down 41% yesterday, perhaps the largest intraday decline that the stock has seen. We'll be watching out for that one too.
No, a lot of people have said that they're surprised that it took this long for it to fall. But then
absolutely, I agree with them, Alex. A lot of them were, because a lot of them were anticipating the decision that the lenders took the day before.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Agam. Yeah. All right, let's talk about what's making headlines across the globe. We've told you about a few of them. Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News has the rest in the first word headlines.
We start with President Trump asking the White House lawyers earlier this year to explore his options for demoting Jerome Powell as Federal Reserve Chairman. Now, we've been told legal officials in the administration weighed the implications of removing Powell from the chair and leaving him merely as a governor. Trump's team concluded that it would be highly questionable to fire Powell without cause, as many on Wall Street would agree. On to Japan now. The country's exports fell for a sixth consecutive month in May, adding to concern about the impact of a prolonged trade war. The value of shipments abroad fell 7.8% from a year earlier. That is slightly less than forecast, and leaving a trade deficit of $8.9 billion. Now, some economists think Japan may contract in the current quarter if data continues to show weakness. To the UK now, Boris Johnson has increased his lead in the race to become the next British Prime Minister, dominating the latest ballot of Conservative Party lawmakers. He now has 126 votes. That's almost 3 times as many as runner-up Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt. Johnson ducked a TV debate on Sunday, which drew accusations that he was not prepared to answer questions. However, he did appear in a later BBC debate on Tuesday evening. And finally, OPEC and its allies are close to agreeing on a date for their next meeting, drawing a veil over a dispute that has raised uncertainty in the oil market. Ministers are now expected to gather in Vienna on July 1st and 2nd to discuss production plans for the rest of the year. Saudi Arabia wants to maintain output curves with global demand weakening as the world economy slows. Russia, however, is said not to be inclined to agree. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan, this is Bloomberg.
All right, that last update that Sue just spoke about with regard to the OPEC meeting, crude has been in focus. I just want to point that out. It's currently standing at just around 62.29. Not too long back, it was heading closer to the $60 per barrel mark. In fact, just under $61 to a barrel. Not too long back, in fact, earlier this year itself, it was trending closer to that $75 per barrel mark. But a lot has happened since then, not least of which are sanctions on Iran and problems in Venezuela. Let's turn now to Somit Sarkar, who's joining in to tell you all about the stocks in news. Morning, Somit. What's on your list today?
Good morning, Alex. On the stocks and news, first we have is Punjab National Bank, where India Ratings has downgraded bonds worth close to 6,750 crore rupees of the bank to close to an A rating from an earlier rating of A+. So now the India Ratings believes that any delays by the management when it comes to capital infusion would likely trigger more pressure on the companies on the bank's capital ratios. Along with that, they also believe that for FY20, if you see, the bank is expected to see higher provisionings and the pressure on profitability to continue for this for the ongoing financial year, that is FY20, though it is expecting the losses to be lower compared to what we had seen in financial year 2018 and financial year 2019, but the overall pressure on the books is expected to continue, and a delay in capital infusion is expected to happen according to India Ratings, and that's the reason they have downgraded their ratings on the bonds worth close to 6,750 crore rupees for Punjab National Bank. For NMDC, if you see, they have produced nearly 3.04 million tons of iron ore in the month of May versus 2.12 million tons produced by the company last year, and the sales were also higher at close to 3.37 million tons compared to 2.31 million tons done by the company in 2018. Now this is on the back of robust sales and production which were driven by its Chhattisgarh and Karnataka mine. Now a sharp jump in Karnataka production is seen despite the fact that the Donimalai plant of the ore of the company was shut for the month completely. Now Edelweiss says that the commissioning of this Donimalai plant and the commissioning of its steel plant will continue to remain an overhang on the stock price, but overall if you see the production and sales number for the month of May, they were robust compared to last year. Third on the list is Canara Bank. Now the board has permitted the stake sale in its associate company, that is Canfin Homes. Now this will depend on appropriate market conditions, and that time they'll go ahead with the sales. Currently, if you see, the bank owns nearly 30% stake in Canfin Homes, which is valued at close to 1,375 crore rupees. So this stock will continue to remain in focus. Fourth on the list is Jain Irrigation. If you see the share price of Jain Irrigation for the last few days, it has seen sharp cuts. As I said, was down by over 20%, and today India Ratings has cut its long-term issuer rating to BBB, and they have placed the rating on a negative watch. Now, according to the rating agency, the downgrade is reflecting the deterioration in the liquidity profile of Jain Irrigation on account of delay in realization of its receivables from micro irrigation system segment. Now, the rating is kept on negative because that reflects the risk of delay in companies' deleveraging plans and a further increase in capital requirement because of this delay in deleveraging and because of a delay in realization of its receivables, which will further worsen its liquidity position. That is what India Ratings is saying, and that's the reason we are seeing this cut in the credit rating. Fifth on the list is HDFC Bank, where RBI has imposed a penalty of close to 1 crore rupees due to non-compliance with direction on KYC and anti-money laundering norms that are put forth by RBI, which is required when it comes to reporting frauds. Last on the list is the JSW Group stocks, that is JSW Steel and JSW Energy. Now both these stocks will remain in focus because the promoters of these companies have pledged additional shares. Now for JSW Steel, if you see, the promoters have pledged additional 1.08% of its equity, while for JSW Energy, the promoters have pledged close to 0.69% of the equity. And JSW Steel will also remain in focus because Goldman Sachs has downgraded its rating on the company to neutral from a buy rating, and they've also cut the target price because the steel spreads have come off and because of the higher leverage that the company has currently on its book.
All right, thanks so much for that, Somit. Well, we all know that India is a populous country, but we may be looking at a population boom in a little less than 8 years. A recent study has concluded that India could overtake China as the world's most populous country by 2027. Take a look. All right, let's talk about something closer to home, at least for us here in the Bloomberg studio. We're based in Mumbai, as you know. Maharashtra Finance Minister Sudhir Mungantiwar presented the budget for the state on Tuesday afternoon. The budget projected a higher revenue deficit for FY20, that's the ongoing financial year. The revenue deficit is seen at 20,293 crore rupees compared with 14,690 crore in the previous financial year. Fiscal deficit for the state is expected to narrow to 2.07% in the current financial year compared to a revised estimate of 2.11% last year. Among provisions related to the agri sector, there were proposals to spend close to 12,600 crore rupees for the Water Resource Department for carrying out irrigation projects in the state. The state has also targeted setting up 25,000 farm ponds during the current financial year. It has also set aside 600 crore rupees for 4 agricultural universities in the state. Measures related to agriculture come after 151 out of the 358 talukas of the state were declared drought hit last year. The situation is no better this year as well due to the delayed onset of the southwest monsoon winds and the monsoon, in fact. But as you know, the latest update from the IMD is that those could be picking up even as we speak. There's clearly lots to talk about over the course of the day, and you'll find all the live market action right here on Bloomberg Quint Live. But there are also several stories on the website, bloombergquint.com, that you should consider reading. The first of these, the Reserve Bank of India will examine concerns over its data localization norms. The government has said this after, or rather a day after Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal held consultations with the e-commerce and tech industries on data protection and privacy in India. Remember, the RBI had last year asked fintech startups and payments firms to ensure that data is stored exclusively on local servers, setting us a tight 6-month deadline for compliance. That deadline was said to have been missed by some foreign firms, including credit card giants Visa and MasterCard. Airline passenger traffic in India picked up in the usually strong holiday month of May, even as Jet Airways halted operations. Air traffic grew 3% over last year as operators added capacity. Nearly 1.2 crore passengers flew in the month, according to data provided by the Directorate General of Civil Aviation. All right, that's all you need to know going to trade today. Do stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up in just a short while. This is Bloomberg Quint.